Namaskaram everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Ashwin, who is practicing as a psychiatrist in Monash Health, Melbourne, Australia. Thank you for coming on the show, Ashwin.
Anna, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
I've seen you online so much, and now I'm very happy to be here with you in person.
Yes. So, with your permission, we can go directly into the podcast if that's okay. Yeah. So, could you talk a bit about how long you have been practicing in this field, so that the listeners and we get to know you a bit more better?
Yeah. So I grew up in Canada, so there medicine is a postgraduate degree. So to study medicine, I first had to finish 4 years of an undergraduate degree, BSc. Then I did medical school, which was 5 years. And then I trained in psychiatry for 5 years. And I completed my training maybe about 6 years ago. 6 years ago. So I've been practicing as a psychiatrist for 6 years, and for the 5 years, for 11 years in total, I've been working.
Oh. So before we go into more of it, could you talk a bit about the podcast is I structure in such a way that we get to know the person more. So if you could talk a bit about your childhood, your school, and how you decided to come into psychiatry and why, it would really be very insightful for us.
Okay, I'll go. And if I go on too much, you can stop me and ask me.
No,
okay?
Too much is good.
Okay, so I was actually born in Kerala, in Kochi. That's where my mother is from.
Oh, I'm here right now.
So very happy to see all of that background.
Yeah.
But I mean, my life involved a lot of travel. So between the ages of 2 and 4, we were in Africa and Nigeria. And we came back to Kerala for a few years. And when I was 10, we moved to Ireland in Europe. And then when I was 14, we moved to Canada. And that's where my family finally settled. And hometown then for me is this town called Trenton, which is 200 kilometers outside of Toronto.
Okay.
But then when I was 24, I decided to go back to Ireland to study. And during one of those summers, I went to Australia to travel, and I met an Australian girl. And so that was 15 years ago.
Oh.
And ultimately, we got married.
Oh.
And so for the past few years, I've been living back and forth between Canada and Melbourne. So I've been here in Melbourne for the past 3 years. Yeah.
You went very fast of meeting Akka. That should have been an elaborate story, but that's okay.
Oh no, if you like, I'll talk a bit more about sort of then what happened in my childhood and what shaped things going forward. In my father's hometown was this town called Punalur, close to Kottayam. So I spent a lot of time there. So there I was very close to nature. Also in Nigeria, in Africa, I was also very close to nature. But my family were very religious. So I got this message that, I couldn't trust what I was observing in the world. What my elders, so my parents or what the religious leaders were saying, that was correct. So I didn't really trust what I was seeing. I couldn't trust the inner wisdom and what I was observing. So so there was a lot of conditioning that happened. So it's in the context of that the seed that I should become a doctor was planted. My father was a doctor, and the messaging that I got was that being a doctor was the be all and end all. It was the ultimate accomplishment in human life, and everything else was unworthy. I had no particular passion for it growing up, so I just kind of went along because it was hard to resist that sort of conditioning. But that caused a lot of internal anxiety, just going along with what somebody else wanted. And so since from age 14, I would say I've felt this tremendous sort of internal struggle. I just couldn't be comfortable where I was within myself. So when I look back a few years, after many years, I see that on paper I'd accomplished a lot of things. I become a researcher. Then I went to medical school. I trained in psychiatry, particularly because I wanted to understand how the human mind worked. But it didn't sort of bring fulfillment. It didn't bring to rest that internal discomfort that I was feeling. Now, college years in North America are also very interesting. There, hedonism is promoted as a way to satisfaction.
What is that? What is that?
Hedonism, basically gratuitous fulfillment of all desires. So things like in college, alcohol and drugs and non-committal, superficial, short-term relationships are readily available. So I didn't quite get entangled in any of those things, but certainly I dipped my feet in enough to know that this wasn't going to reach fulfillment. So yeah, so now, again, a bit more in North America, there was this culture of leaving home to study and for professional development. So when I was about 17, 18, I left home.
Okay.
And I went to college.
Okay.
and so in college, I met a lot of people from various backgrounds. And so there I realized that not everybody thought the way my parents did.
Right.
So slowly, kind of the religious ideas of my upbringing were replaced by Sigmund Freud, and also rationalist science, and then so I wanted to explore truth in a more rationalistic and scientific way. So I went to graduate school. I went to do a master's. I went to do research, and I went to this university called McMaster University, where modern medicine, so evidence-based medicine, was born. So went there with the idea that I was going to think my way to truth. So one thing I wanted to say was, talking about Freud. I know you yourself had did some work in psychology, or interested. So Freud presented for me a much more complex view of the mind and of human experience than kind of the medieval religious ideas that I was presented with. So I thought, so when I first discovered Freud, it was a big opening for me. Okay. But then when I was in graduate school and doing research, I thought a lot about things, and I thought I could think my way to the truth. And I quickly recognized that my mind wasn't going to be the answer. And I knew that if I pushed my mind long enough, I could damage it as well.
Okay.
So saw the limitation of that. Now I could pause there for a minute to see if you want to ask any questions, or if you want to take us in any other direction, or if I should keep
talking.
It's
going great. Like, continue on. Like, I think it's perfect. Yeah.
So I'll tell you, when I was about 21 or 22, September 11th happened.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, you were there. You were there at that time.
I was in Canada, and it was very close. I basically on the border with the US, so we're so heavily influenced by what happens in the US. I traveled back and forth. I had a lot of family. So I was frequently traveling back and forth. So that was a big wake-up call for me in terms of moving, just waking up from a more sort of superficial life. See, when I was growing up, I'd always hear from my father that America was in America, the sky was the limit. And America, of course, included Canada. Yeah, and what this meant was that if you're willing to work hard, you could accomplish whatever you wanted professionally, materially.
This is the American dream. I hear about it a lot in movies.
This is the American dream, and we were sold it. And of course, my father believed it, so he went there. Okay. And my uncles also believed, and so they went to the States.
Usually in Kerala, we have the Gulf dream, I think.
Okay. I know of the Gulf dream too, but my father told that he followed the American dream.
Yeah.
So basically, and I believe that, hey, in America, everybody's equal, all that kind of stuff, everybody's equal opportunities. But then after September 11th, I noticed that there were a lot of racist policies that the American government was now enacting, and it was being enforced systematically. For example, when I'd go to the US airports, or when I'd be crossing the border from Canada to the US by road, I'd be stopped for random checks. And this, in my opinion, had a lot to do with my physical appearance. I could pass for somebody from the Middle East. So that made me very angry. Like, how just because the way I look, you're treating me differently, right? So I joined the activist movement. I joined the anti-war protests and things like that.
Oh, okay. You have to talk about that. I have seen this only in the news little bit.
Yes. So basically, I was reading the book Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky and many other books, and he's this figure, this activist figure who triggered activism in a lot of young folk. And I remember, when he came to our university, I went with one of the professors from my department to listen to him speak. When I'm part of this kind of progressive activist movement, there's a sense of enlightenment that I felt, because I really know how the world works. I've rejected mainstream thinking. All these people, they're asleep. And the fundamental thinking was, if I could just change the world enough, I could feel better inside. That was the thinking, right? But when I looked around a lot of my activist sort of friends and so on, I saw a lot of fellow actives saw a lot of anger, and it was very unstable. I knew that this was not going to lead to anything positive. You know, this much anger is not going to help, right? So a few years later, I met my wife, and she had a lot of sort of family, like grandparents' generation or even older, who had died in the Holocaust, in the Jewish Holocaust. And her perspective was, unless activism comes from a place of love, you know, it's not going to work. And if it's coming from a place of anger and hate, it's not really going to. So so I'm like, okay, I believe that. And then subsequently, a lot of my energy has gone into the relationship, right? So the relationship has consumed a lot of energy. And, you know, growing up, this idea of romantic love, if you find the right romantic partner, your life will be deeply fulfilled. That was presented in all the movies, and everybody believed it. I believed that growing up. And
we still believe it. We still believe it.
I don't. So I learned very quickly that that's not true. I mean, a relationship is hard work. I mean, you have to be it's like sadhana. Relationship is a form of sadhana. Okay. And it's constantly balancing things. It's not that you don't just unconsciously, it doesn't take you anywhere, right?
Right.
So that was, so a lot of the avenues that I thought were going to lead to fulfillment did not take me to what I was looking for, right? So I thought, you know, a lot of what I've been told growing up by my parents, then by the religious establishments, by society, nothing was working. Nothing was working in terms of taking me to fulfillment and calming that kind of conflict inside. So I remember when I was about 19 years old, I remember watching a television program, and there was a very kind of very well-known Western Buddhist scholar who had just returned from a monastery in India. And he was talking about how in the Buddhist universe, in the Buddhaverse, life, the natural state of life and natural state of a human being is one of harmony and peace. Now, I'd grown up in the Catholic Church where we're talking about original sin, and also Freud is talking about the Oedipus complex. So I thought conflict was the natural state of a human being. But now this idea that, and I certainly feel conflicted inside, and I'm like, this is not sustainable, this sense of feeling. So the idea of harmony really appealed to me. But it was not really until I was about 24, when all the other avenues that I spoke of had been exhausted, that I said, okay, maybe I'll follow this spiritual thing. And I started attending Buddhist centers, and I was introduced to meditation. So that was 17 years ago. And since that time, I've practiced in many traditions. I mean, mainly Tibetan Buddhism, in Zen Buddhism. Also, I've done Qigong. And I've seen various kinds of healers. For example, I've spent time with a couple of shamans from the Peruvian Andes, from the Peruvian Amazon. I've done sort of psychotherapy, and psychotherapy was part of my training. But I made sure that I selected psychotherapists who were also Buddhist teachers and so on. So did a lot of that.
Could you talk a bit more about that, Buddhism and all? I think people would love to listen about that, like how you found them and the experience.
Oh yeah. So I'll talk about. I mean, I think the type of Buddhism that really sort of appealed to me was, was Zen. Even though I started off in Tibetan Buddhism, and Sadhguru talks a lot about how Tibetan Buddhism is really a mixture of tantra from.
You're watching Sadhguru exclusive, I think.
He talks about mixing tantra and you know the cultures of Tibet. And so, I mean, for me it was something that I took to, because there were you know, where the town in Eastern Canada where I was living, there was this great Tibetan master. His name was Chogyam Trungpa. He's well known. I mean, he was a radical man, and he drank a lot, and he had sort of you know, crazy wisdom, they called it. Okay. So he had left Tibet. He came to India. Then he went to Oxford University to do a PhD. Then from there he went to America, and he established a big center, and he called it Shambhala. And so then he, at some point in the 1980s, he went to Eastern Canada, and a lot of the students from America came with him. And so with him were many professionals. There were doctors, engineers, psychiatrists, and some of these people got faculty academic positions at the university where I was training.
Okay.
So that's how I was introduced to this. And it was great. It provided me with a community. I started learning how to meditate. But then the path that really appealed to me was Zen. So Zen is for example, when you look at sort of the Tibetan drawings and murals and so on, there are these, there are pictures of the gods and goddesses, magnificent, multicolored. Some are very, very sort of fierce and all of that. Zen in comparison is very, very sterile. People wear these black robes. There's nothing on the walls, and the meditation is called Zazen, where you just sit and you stare at the wall, right?
Oh, is it? Okay.
So it's a very, in my opinion, a very brutal form. And for me, when I actually look back, I wasn't really meditating. What I was doing is I was sitting, I was staring at the wall, and I was in my head. It was just sheer torture and agony. So I think it's a path with a lot of energy. But at my phase in life, I invest a lot of time in it, but I wasn't getting, all these things I think helped. It helped me cope a little bit, or somewhat with the internal conflict that I was feeling, the distress that I was feeling, but it didn't really alleviate that distress. Okay. So I mean, I just want to pause there for a second. Is there anything more I can talk about Buddhism, or?
No, that I wanted to know how you went, and that you covered that. That's perfect.
That was it. So I mean, I then I want to come to Isha and sadhguru.
Okay.
So things changed. So for 17 years, I'd been trying various different things, but it was 3 years ago when I was initiated into Shambhavi that things changed dramatically. So I was always on the spiritual seeking. I was always looking online, internet. I was looking at various spiritual teachers, and I've studied with many. So one night I saw, Sadhguru just popped up on the screen, and initially I honestly found him. I found him to be very boring, so I clicked past.
Okay.
And I said, oh, okay, who's this Sabu? I mean, but then I came back to it. I remember maybe a couple of months down the road, and I just, this time he came up again. I didn't turn off. I said, I'll turn it off now.
Okay.
And before I knew it, I think about an hour or so had passed, and my mouth was just open like this. So, wow. And then underneath there was this advertisement that came, Inner Engineering Online. I think some volunteers were sitting in America.
Yeah.
So I clicked on it and I said, oh, okay, there's this Inner Engineering online course. So I signed up for Inner Engineering right away, and I started taking the program. So at that time, my son was very young. My son had just been born. My wife was going through a long sort of health crisis. So what I would do is I get up very early in the morning. I get up around 3 o'clock because I had to go to work, and I could leave for work at around 7 or something. And I would sit down and I'd do the modules. And I have to tell you, within the first hour of doing the first module, I knew that I was going to be free. I had this sort of internal sense that I didn't know what that meant, but that this was it. I discovered the final thing, So, I finished Inner Engineering online, and I finished it all and said, oh, this is it. But then at the end they said, oh, you can now learn something called Shambhavi Kriya.
Okay.
And it's in person. I said, what is this? I thought this course is everything. I was initially disappointed, right?
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, how do I go and learn this? Because I'm in such a small town in Eastern Canada. It's so isolated. I mean, where do I go? And then before I knew it, there was another ad that came across the screen. Sadhguru was coming to San Diego for Inner Engineering Total. And he's coming, in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks. And I said, my God, I have to do this. So I went and told my wife, and I said, this is not the time. You have a small baby. You cannot. And I thought about it, said, no, I'm going. I'll get my mother to come from Toronto and she'll stay with you. I don't care. I have to do this. So eyes closed. I booked, it was basically a retreat. It was an inner engineering retreat that Sadhguru does. There was only 100 people. I called and I said, they said, this is usually the program as well as accommodation packaged in together. But they said, all the accommodation is full already. You're too late. And I said, what am I going to do? So then I said, don't worry, let me register for the program, but I'll book Airbnb close by.
Okay.
they said, okay. So I quickly found an Airbnb. I registered for the program, and within 2 weeks, I was in San Diego. I did the program, and
Sadhguru was there. Sadhguru was there for your retreat.
Sadhguru was there.
Okay.
Sadhguru was conducting the program himself. It was 4 beautiful
Which year?
days.
Which year? Which year was it?
Oh, 1997. Sorry, so what am I saying? 2007.
2007. Oh, yes.
2017 was May, and it was great. It was great. I was amazed. There was a lot of dancing because I thought spirituality was something that is serious and all that, but there was a lot of dancing and singing, and I absolutely loved it. And so I did that. So then of course I had to go back home to Canada, and for the next 3 months or so, I practiced just in that small town by myself. I just did my daily sadhana. But my wife, who's Australian, had enough of the Canadian winters. She was tired of seeing snow piled up to the the top of the windows, and she's been telling me for the previous year, let's move to Australia. But I was dragging my mind, I was dragging my feet, saying, I'm here, I'm comfortable here. Why am I going to Australia? So, but I mean, when I did the program, it somehow cleared up a lot of blockages, and I said, of course, I should move to Australia, where my life wants to be. So within 3 months, we're here in Melbourne, Australia, and the great thing here is that there's a small, but there is a very strong, committed Isha community here, and I started volunteering for programs, and volunteering has just been as important as sadhana for me, because I would say in the last now after 3 years, I can finally say that I've found a sense of peace and calm within myself. And I think the key factor in all of this is really developing a better understanding of my mind. So I have a very busy mind, and I think I'm always sort of agitating it. And I realize that if I can just let it settle, if I can just let it be at peace, then I'll be a lot more calm myself. Because I like to think a lot. I mean, at night I used to have trouble sleeping, and during the day I felt very agitated in the body. But allowing the mind to rest, everything has come to a greater sense of peace. When I look back, a lot of that anxiety was caused by this mental activity, this being in the mind. And positive mental agitation, physical agitation, and I would say this level of it's only the last few weeks, few months in the context of COVID and that kind of intensity that it has brought that this has happened for me. I think typically, what would happen is I'd run away with the mind. Say a disappointment may happen, then get pulled down into more of a depressed state, and then something happy or something positive may happen, then I can run off into very positive, fantasy. I can create a fantasy world.
Right.
And now what I'm noticing is that when disappointing things happen, I'm less likely to stay in that place of feeling low. I can bounce back up very quickly, and if something positive happens, I'm not going up there. I'm just kind of staying level. So that's just freed up a lot of energy. And I'm recognizing this is probably what Sadhguru says, if you don't mess with your mind, you'll be perfectly okay. So I think, and I'm starting to get a firsthand experience of that.
So Anna, like everyone is saying, like because of this COVID and all that, the mental health pandemic is coming. So is that do you see an increase in people facing anxiety and stress while you're working in this field?
So my work right now, I work in the emergency room, and so Monash Health is one of the largest health services in Australia. It has 3 main hospitals, and I work in one of the hospitals, and it's a very busy emergency department. So I'm part of the emergency psychiatric service. So when various patients come in, if they've got a mental health concern, they'll call the psychiatric team, which is me. So I'm seeing, I think what's happening is, people are always going to be stressed out by something. That's what I've noticed. But right now the stressor is COVID. So COVID is on many people's minds. Also in Melbourne, we've been in lockdown for the past couple of months. And so that's also squeezing people very heavily because it's cutting them off from a lot of their supports, and they're having to stay inside.
Yeah.
If they're working from home, they're trying to homeschool. So it's the life has become like a house has become like a pressure cooker, and for many people, some people anyway, they're experiencing it as a prison.
Right.
So this is really increasing people's anxiety and their stress, and people are vulnerable already. It's aggravating all that. So we do see a lot of people coming with stress, and of course, I mean, it can, when stress becomes very extreme, it can lead to issues such as thinking of suicide, and so we see a lot of that. So it's definitely putting pressure on people, for sure.
So also you're a psychiatrist, so like is like meditation and yoga, like is it scientific, like just like Western medicine is super scientific, like, or is this just like a mumbo jumbo? Like coming from you, it would be great, because I get a lot of questions in my DMs, like I'm facing stress, but I think, should I, will this help me? So do you think like, is it, or is it just some random thing from your own experience? Like,
so from my own, from my own personal experience, I mean, it's been transformative. I've been practicing this for 17 years, and I've looked into it in many ways. So it's worked, and it's worked for many people, and it's worked for you and for many listeners, right? But then, I mean, there's also how do we answer the logical, rational mind? And for that, we need classical research. And there is a mountain of evidence for meditation. And I was involved. I've been involved with different kinds of mindfulness and meditation research for some time. I'm working on a couple of, because I was an assistant professor of medicine at Dalhousie University in Eastern Canada. So under that, I did a couple of studies, which we're now writing up for publication. But also, there is a tremendous amount of evidence for meditation practices. In fact, what I've done is, what I want to start doing now is I want to start looking at practices such as inner engineering, Isha, kriya, and so on. So I've actually made a little PowerPoint slide.
Yeah. Could you show that if it's possible? Like,
I can certainly show that. Shall we show it now?
Yeah.
So I mean, I've made it for academic people. So it may become very dry and boring. So you throw in whatever you can to spice it up. Okay. And mainly ask for clarification. If something's not clear. Okay. So I'll just do share screen with you. Do you see the
Yes, I can see the benefits of Isha yoga practice.
Yeah, so this is the type of presentation that I would do for the academic community, and I want to start a research study on Isha kriya, or inner engineering, at Monash Health, and so this is something that I've been presenting to the community there, the academic community there, to basically get their interest. This is specifically about Isha kriya, and this particular, do we need to explain what Isha kriya is, or can I go right into that?
You can explain it a bit, actually, I think, like what it is.
So first of all, Isha kriya is a 15-minute guided practice that anybody can do, and they can learn it in person or they can learn it online. So this particular study is a Harvard Medical School study which measured the impact of Isha kriya on operating room professionals, which included surgeons, anesthesiologists, and nurses. So this study, an in-person meditation workshop, was demonstrated during surgical meetings and at also an international anesthesia conference using the 15-minute guided Isha kriya. The participants were surveyed for mood changes after the meditation using the Profile of Mood States questionnaire. So basically, it measured mood states such as tension, anger, fatigue, depression, and confusion. So this graph shows total mood disturbance on the left-hand side. And if we look to the right, this is before meditation. So they had higher mood disturbance before meditation, but immediately after Isha kriya, the 15 minutes, their mood disturbance came down. So these were for the surgeons, the surgical meeting. But the same thing we saw for the anesthesiologists at the anesthesia conference. So their mood disturbance came down after the Isha kriya meditation practice. So this basically means that they were far less distressed after the Isha kriya, just one Isha kriya session.
Just one. Okay.
Yeah, just one. So if you'd like, I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
Unless you have some questions.
Yeah. So how many participants were there in like each of these? Like,
Oh, I think it would have been between 50 and 100.
50 and 100. Yeah, but these are all very trained, like proper
These
doctors.
are
Yeah.
these are hardcore operating leaders, and they're the hardest bunch to reach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even it worked even for them.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Next slide.
So this is Inner Engineering Online, and again, I'll give you the talk that I usually give the academic colleagues.
Yes.
So Inner
Yeah.
Engineering Online is a course that imparts practical tools to manage one's body, mind, emotions, and energy. Inner Engineering is distilled from the essence of yogic sciences. It's 7 online modules, approximately 90 minutes each. And the modules include discourses and guided meditations. And once you complete a module, it unlocks a Q&A video that clarifies topics explored in each module. So this particular study was conducted at Rutgers University, New Jersey, and it measured the impact of Inner Engineering Online on a group of employees at a US Fortune 500 company. Employee well-being and positive organizational behavior was measured before and after the Inner Engineering Online program. So the parameters they measured were basically 2 groups. One was employee well-being, and this included energy, joy, mindfulness, a sense of wholeness within oneself, and a connection with colleagues. And also positive organizational behavior. So this is meaningful work, psychological capital, and work engagement. So those are the things that I think employers will be very interested in. Well-being of the employee, as well as how well they're contributing to work. So this is a busy slide, but basically it shows that when we look at different parameters, psychological capital, self-efficacy, hope, optimism, after Inner Engineering Online, they had improvement in all these parameters. So this is after, and this is before. So as you can see in all these parameters, Inner Engineering Online improved. When it comes to work engagement, connection with work, dedication, vigor at work, also Inner Engineering, it improved after there was an improvement. Also mindfulness, just being mindful of what's arising in the present moment, sense of inclusiveness, joy, and vitality. Also, there was an increase in all of these after the Inner Engineering Online training program.
So usually I say it helps. Inner engineering won't make you go to Himalayas, and it will help you with work. So now we have research which actually shows that you can.
Absolutely, and this is something I think employers will be very interested in, because it not only makes their employees more happy, it makes them much more productive at work. So I think if nothing else, it'll improve the company's bottom line. So the next study was also on Inner Engineering Online, and they were looking at employee stress and burnout. And this was a Harvard Medical School study, and they looked at perceived stress levels in employees. So there are 2 groups here. There is this blue graph and a line and the red line. So the blue line are the people who got Inner Engineering Online.
Okay. Oh.
So we can see that for these people from week 0 to week 4, as they were doing the modules, their stress levels came down quite a bit. And it came down even further. Now the red group were the control group. These people were asked to not do Inner Engineering.
Okay.
They were just asked to do some self-care, like reading and what have you. So they didn't, their change between week 0, week 4 was slight, not really significant.
Okay.
But at week 4, they were asked to start the Inner Engineering modules.
Oh,
And all of a sudden,
okay.
their stress levels go down quite a bit.
Okay.
Right?
I was about to ask, like, without they also reached what they did to suddenly, decrease their stress. Yeah.
Exactly. They did Inner Engineering at this point. So it just basically shows that Inner Engineering Online can reduce stress, and we already saw that it can improve our our functionality within ourselves and within work. So, and right now, just because of the restrictions around the world, Inner Engineering is really what's available.
Yeah.
But as you know, as soon as restrictions raise, we'll go back to Inner Engineering Total, which is so just to explain. So this is a 3-day in-person program which includes all of the content of Inner Engineering Online, plus learning the Shambhavi kriya practice. So this particular study was conducted at the University of California at San Diego, and it measured the impact of inner engineering total. So for this, participants attended the 3-day in-person inner engineering total program. Following the program, participants were instructed to practice the Shambhavi kriya for 21 days. And after 6 weeks of daily practice, stress was measured using the perceived stress scale, and general well-being was measured using the general well-being scale.
These are like scales used to measure like the stress.
Yes, exactly. Those are the rating scales that they used. And so this is stress, the perceived stress scale, and this is well-being. So I mean, I'll explain what these 3 lines mean. So there were 3 groups. They found that after inner engineering, there were 3 groups of people. There were people, the black line were people practice daily, every day.
Oh, okay.
And we see that for them, there's a sharp decline over time. From week 0 to week 6, they had a big decline in their stress levels. Now, this dotted line here were people who practice moderately. So they
Okay.
some days, but they also practice some days, okay?
Okay.
So they too had a decrease, but not to the extent of the people who practice daily, okay? And now, this dotted line were people who didn't practice very much. Maybe they practiced once or twice a week.
Oh my God, I'm mind blown by this. Like now I can show people like practice daily is important.
So this has shown me that practicing consistently is vital to maintaining and actually achieving the benefits. Now let's look at well-being on the other hand. So we see that the people who practice on a daily basis, their well-being went up considerably, okay? And the people who were practicing moderately, their well-being also went up, but not to the extent of people who practice daily. Now the people who were not practicing consistently, their well-being actually went down.
Oh.
So I mean, I don't know if this is statistically significant, but it certainly, it hasn't gone up, and it's gone down a little bit. So this just shows that practicing consistently is so vitally important.
This is very, very good. This part itself, I can make a video out of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people need to sort of understand that it's very important to practice consistently. Next, I want to go to Bhava Spandana.
Oh, that also research is there. I didn't know that.
Yes. So Bhava Spandana I have done, and so this is it's a 4-day. It's called short form BSP. It's a 4-day advanced yoga and meditation program designed to enhance participants' perception and sensitivity to life by going beyond the limitations of body, mind, and experiencing higher levels of consciousness. So to do BSP, inner engineering, including the Shambhavi kriya, is a prerequisite. So you have to do that first before you do it. So this particular study was conducted at Indiana University School of Medicine, and it measured the impact of BSP. So participants attended the 4-day in-person BSP program, and the study measured depression, anxiety, awareness and observation of what's happening in the present moment, happiness, all of these things were measured. Also, a couple of neurochemical markers were measured. Endocannabinoids, these are neurochemicals associated with enhanced mood and reduced anxiety, depression, were measured. And we'll talk a bit more about that afterwards. And also brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is a neurochemical associated with neuronal regeneration. Both these things were measured.
That's great. Endocannabinoids is the same thing when people smoke weed and something like that.
And you know what? I'll come back to that. Yes, it's the natural cannabinoid. Now maybe we'll talk about that a bit more when we get to it. So let's look at so this is depression and this is anxiety. So this is pre-meditation, this is post-Bhava Spandana. So we can see that there's a sharp decline in depression after, senses of feeling of depression after Bhava Spandana.
Okay.
Same thing with anxiety, it's gone down. And this just shows the change. It shows that, it went down, the depression scores went down, anxiety scores went down. So let's look at awareness and observation. So this is basically what people call mindfulness, which is just capacity to aware, attend to what's happening in the moment, right? Basically being perceptive of what's really there. People's capacity to perceive what's really there went up after Bhava Spandana. Likewise, their sense of happiness went up as well. Okay? So now let's go to the biological, the neurochemicals. We see that the endocannabinoid anandamide went, and also the nerve growth factor BDNF also went up. After. So this is basically, this means that the brain can regenerate itself, rewire itself. So I want to come to the question of endocannabinoids. And so the reason why cannabis can give people a euphoric effect sometimes is that because the body contains receptors and pathways for that already. So cannabis is an external, THC or tetrahydrocannabinol that we get from marijuana or weed is an external substance that triggers a natural pathway, giving us euphoric states. So what it means is that a capacity to experience euphoria is within us.
Okay.
And for me, I have to say that when I did BSP, it was a great party. I had a good experience. I didn't quite feel the euphoria, but when I volunteered for BSP happened.
Okay.
I felt it, right?
Okay, right.
I felt, to be honest with you, I've also experimented with cannabis in my past, but now with this, I realize that it can naturally just happen. So, and this explains why, because BSP is causing a natural endocannabinoid to go up in the body, right? So we're generating natural cannabinoids to give us that euphoric state. So it explains in part why during BSP people experience that sense of euphoria, which is one of the experiences. So
now we'll have an increase in rush for Bhavaspantan, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's very powerful, and I think, you know what, this is a very simplistic view, as you know, that it's a very profound process, but I think it just shows that what people are talking about isn't just in their heads. It's a neurochemical change that happens in the nervous system that gives them, changes their chemistry from within. Yeah. So I can stop the presentation unless if you have some questions about any of the slides.
No, like this is the first slide in my life. I think I'm very attentively listening. Usually I sleep into. So I got everything. Like I perfectly understood. Okay. So, yep. So thank you so much, and I would like to know, I'm quite sure a lot of listeners would like to reach out to you. So what would be the best form, like email or where would they be able to?
Now what I can do is I can send you my email address if you like.
Yeah.
And they can reach out to me that way.
Okay, I'll link it in the description for them.
Yeah.
So Anna, is there something like what would you like to add to the listeners? Like something more you have to say? I don't know. No, I'm out of questions. Like I'm blown away by the presentation. Like I'm okay, I need to post this fast.
What I'll do then is I'll just sort of so the presentation is just I would say it's just the rational, logical. I think it'll give people who are already practicing some confidence, and it'll those people who are skeptical, I'm not really sure if it's really going to work.
Yeah.
It'll give them some hard evidence that this stuff does really work. Okay. But for me, all of this just opened up a journey. I mean, I think doing inner engineering and volunteering for Isha opened up a path which I think has increased the well-being in my life. And one thing I also want to add is, when in terms of when people want to maximize their well-being, one thing that's also helped me, along with doing the sadhana, doing the practices, is also adopting an Ayurvedic diet.
Okay.
So Ayurveda, I mean, it has, it recommends how to eat seasonally. And one of the things I've noticed that the quality of the body and the type of diet that I'm eating has a big influence on body chemistry. And we talk about different gunas. There's sattva, tamas, rajas. And if we eat in a way that promotes sattva, I've certainly noticed that my mind, the momentum of the mind is far less. And it's I'm less likely to run away with thoughts. So that's also helped in a huge way. And also there's Din-acharya, daily routine. So which means it recommends when to get up, when to sleep, how much to sleep, and it's all about.
Can we have your Din-acharya?
Yeah, so my Din-acharya involves, I mean, I because I work, I work part-time. I don't work every day. So the days that I work, I get up at 3 a.m.
Oh.
And I do my sadhana, and my sadhana involves Angamardana, then Surya Kriya, then Shambhavi Mahmudra. Then I do some chanting, I chant Brahmananda Swarupa at 6:20 a.m. Then I chant the Lingabhairavi Devi.
Oh, okay.
Then I've got some other chants. I mean,
Right.
I've got a few other chants and things like that. I also do the prostration to Devi, the Devi Gudi. So I mean, I do the prostration.
You have the Devi Gudi?
Yes, I have Devi Gudi.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I also have Dhanilinga Yantra because last year I did. I went to the ashram and I did Linga Seva.
Oh, okay.
So I brought back the yantra. So all of that has energized the space, and I've got a big sadhguru photo. I mean, I've set up a little shrine, that energizes the space.
You should send us a pic so that I can put it in the description.
I can use that. So and at night I sort of light a lamp in our bedroom and also in my son's bedroom. So the ambience, the space has been created. So in the morning I do this, and then when I finish my sadhana, I go and have breakfast. So according to the Din-acharya, it says that you should not sleep past 6 a.m. You should always get up before 6, because after 6 a.m. the tamasic guna accumulates. So it becomes harder to get up, actually. You become heavy.
No.
And particularly for people who are prone to depression, it's certainly not a good idea to sleep past 6, because it can make you feel more heavy. So getting up before 6 is a must. So on the days that I go to work, I'm getting up at 3. And on the days that I'm not working, I sleep until 4 a.m.
Okay.
So get up at 4.
You are saying sleep until 4 a.m. Most people like 4 a.m.
So for me, even on weekends, I get up at 4, because I notice that when I do my sadhana and I follow the Din-acharya, I'm very energized, right? But if I let any of this go, then I'll start to become heavy, and then the momentum or the inertia to break out of these states will be very difficult. So then I have breakfast, and breakfast should be had between 6 and 8. And I can recommend a book to everybody by a teacher of Ayurveda. It's called Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom by Acharya Shoonya. She's from Ayodhya, from a long line of teachers, but she settled in California about 3 decades ago. She's a lot of Western teachers, so she's been able to communicate this in a very useful way. So I'll send you that link as well.
You'll find it in Amazon somewhere.
It's definitely in Amazon. So it means, eating between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. and then don't eat between meals. And then then the next meal should be lunchtime, between 12 and 1. So that's when the physiological, the metabolic processes are most intense. So that's the time to eat. And also the biggest meal should be lunch. And the second biggest meal should be breakfast. And at supper time, at dinner time, that's when the digestive process is weakest. So either have a light meal or don't have any meal. So I actually don't eat. I don't eat supper. I only eat 2 meals a day. So I have breakfast and I have lunch. And the main thing is I do not eat anything in between meals. And I don't sleep, and I don't eat at night. And also go to sleep before 10 o'clock. Go to sleep. And so this is the basic Din-acharya. And also then many other things like avoiding intoxicants. I mean, I've tried my fair share of intoxicants and no alcohol, no drugs, those sorts of things, and I don't do those things. So all of that also helps.
Have they naturally dropped, or like they have naturally doing this practice?
They naturally dropped off, because I remember once I started doing Shambhavi and so on, I noticed that intoxicants no longer had any effect on me, because I think a lot of it is because maybe the natural endocannabinoids have gone up. So I don't need external sources anymore. And also what I've noticed, my own experience with intoxicants is, for a short pleasurable experience, but there's also a very unhappy feeling that comes. Like with alcohol, it may make you feel lighter, but then there's a depressive effect that comes. And with cannabis, what it does is, yes, it'll lift you, but it'll also make you very anxious and very paranoid. So it's never a clean experience, a very dirty experience. With these practices, it's very, very clear. And right now, what I can actually, just using my breath, I can go into a very pleasant state, right? So whereas if you're dependent on intoxicants, you've got to take these intoxicants, right? So all of those things naturally dropped away. There was no place for them within my system anymore.
Awesome, awesome. Awesome, Ashinana. So thank you so much. Like anything else like you would like to add? So I think we got the complete package.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay, sure, sure. Yeah.
Like Din-acharya, like so yeah, I forgot to ask. Like so people like so anyone who is suffering from mental health issues. So do you think like at what level should they go for this? Like what for an extreme case should they go for medication? Like how do they find the balance between like this
Yeah,
and
so I mean, I think this is what I've sort of, I know that if you're going for Isha programs, they will do screening. They'll screen you for your any kind of mental health history that you have, and they will uh, they'll advise you on whether you should take inner engineering or any of the advanced programs. So Isha Kriya, also Upa Yoga, anybody can learn online. Inner engineering, anybody can take. I don't think anyone has access to it. And I would say that certainly anybody would benefit from these things. And if people are in extreme states, they should definitely seek professional help. And I think that also I think it is what sort of the Isha teachers would say as well.
yeah.
And I've heard when listening
Yes.
volunteering for Isha programs, this is definitely what they would say. But so really, I mean, the programs the practices that have been put out there for free, like Isha Kriya, Upa Yoga, Chit-Sati meditations, inner engineering online, I think they're put out with the awareness that anybody can really do this. And I would say that even I just listening to sadhguru, he's said that the Upa Yoga practice can bring basic mental, emotional, and physical stability. And I think it's my impression that if people do that practice, and they do it consistently, they can achieve a great deal of stability through that.
Like if they like children start practicing itself, they can remain immune to this mental health issues, like I think, right?
I think what so that's my hope. And I think one of my interests is researching how meditation and yoga can increase people's stress resilience, because we know that with mental health issues, it's not that you inherit a gene from your parents and you become depressed. It's just that whatever vulnerability you may have because of your genetics or because of the way you were raised, you have to have stressors, certain stressful situations to trigger any depression, anxiety, what have you. But we know in the mental health world that it's called a stress diathesis model. So you can have vulnerability, but you need a stress to activate it.
Okay.
So what it means is that if you can improve your tolerance to stress, you can then avoid, then if you can cope well with stress, you can avoid having depression, anxiety, all those things. So my personal interest is actually to bring these practices to schools, such as Upa Yoga, Isha Kriya, to the school system, so that kids can learn this as part of the academic curriculum, so that their coping and their stress resilience is boosted from an early age, so they can handle the stresses of life, and so they won't, so they'll reduce their chances of getting depressed and anxious and so on. Because now what I'm recognizing is that anxiety, depression is very common in young kids. And many young children are going on antidepressants and so on, precisely because there isn't this prevention strategy in medicine. So in almost every other field of medicine, for example, in cardiology, we know that we should go and exercise.
Yeah, right.
So if we eat unhealthy food and we don't exercise, our arteries will start to clog up with cholesterol and we'll have an heart attack. But we don't wait until we have a heart attack to do something about it. What we do is we go and we eat healthy, we exercise, right? But it should be the same for mental health. We should treat the brain in the same way. We shouldn't wait until we're depressed or anxious to go and do something about it. We should be training our mind, our brain, and our physiology to be resilient to the stressors of life, so that these things happen. So there needs to be an exercise for the mind and for the system, for the human system. That's what yoga and meditation, these practices are. That's what the yoga and the kriyas are. So I'm seeing Upa Yoga, I'm seeing Isha Kriya, inner engineering, Shambhavi Mahamudra, all these practices as enhancing the resilience and capacity of the human system so that it can tolerate stress. But we all know that it's not just about tolerating stress, it's just one small side effect. It can make you a much more functional human being. So one thing I wanted to add is, like, during our volunteering, as you know, that many people would consider what kind of things that happen the volunteers do basically superhuman, right?
Yeah, right.
Because we have certain practices, everything
Yeah.
is controlled. So we know that the body can, under the right conditions, the body can function far beyond its capacity. Not only can it avoid disease and illness, it can function at extremely high levels. And I think these practices, if we start them early enough in life, they'll just naturally enhance our capacity.
Thank you so much, Ashwin. I think this was a boost for my sadhana. I'll start waking up a little more early now. I was getting up a late. So, thank you so much, Ashwin. Like, it's been really a pleasure for me to take this podcast. Thank you so much. Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.